We are a people organisation. We are nothing without our people. We don't manufacture anything other than excellent students that go on and transform the world. So for us, retention is absolutely vital.
Hey everybody, I'm here with Richard Taylor today, who is a wonderful Mo customer, and I'm really delighted to talk to him a little bit about what culture engagement means in the education sector. So Richard, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself to get us started, please.
Of course. Hi, Luke. My name is Richard Taylor. I'm the Deputy CEO for Operations for Leigh Academies Trust. I've been with the Trust just over a decade now, and I was previously the people director, so in my previous role, engagement was absolutely critical for us as an organisation. We are a network of 33 academies, both primary, secondary and special education needs. We employ just under 4,000 staff and we educate 25,000 students. We have a big footprint in the southeast covering Kent, Medway and southeast London. And it's really exciting to be here today.
Great, thank you ever so much. I'm going to jump right in at the deep end, and it's a big assumption for me, but I believe it is true, which is retention and people really make your business, right? Or your organisation, I should say, sorry. That you are people powered. They teach, they support, they help, and therefore keeping hold of them, especially the good ones, feels like it would be vital. So it would be really useful to just get a sense of how you think about your people strategy and how in turn that might inform your engagement and retention strategies that you look to understand and improve on.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, you're right. We are a people organisation. We are nothing without our people. We don't manufacture anything other than excellent students that go on and transform the world. So for us, retention is absolutely vital. And actually, for us, we've discovered and documented and evidence that retention is directly linked to better outcomes for students. So teachers that stay longer with us, they build stronger relationships, they contribute better performance across our academies and create that better continuity in learning for our students. So retention is absolutely a strategic focus for us. One of the things we did this year, we launched a new kind of side strategy specifically around retention called our Stay and Grow strategy. That was sort of bolts onto our main people strategy, but it recognises that retention is quite a complex matter. When we developed that, we looked at two particular kind of areas. We looked externally at research that the Education Endowment Foundation had done around what were the critical elements that leaders could do to drive teacher retention. And we also took about 500,000 data points of surveys that we'd done over the last sort of 7 years and used that to critically design a strategy that we felt would retain people in the long term. And it's sort of built around sort of three key themes, which was consistent with the research. It was around things like prioritizing professional development. You know, that applies.
If you're in education, you probably like to be educated.
And schools traditionally do a lot of, inset days. If you're a parent, you'll know that. But actually, it's a lot of that is kind of the same learning for everybody. So we looked at how we prioritize individual professional development and actually target, what people actually need. The other key strand was around building relational trust. And this is a really important dynamic for both driving engagement and therefore retention. How do you build that sort of transparent communication, that shared decision making, and really importantly, the meaningful recognition of achievement? And that was how we first got involved with Mo, looking at that kind of recognition strategy. We were already doing, bits here, bits there. We'd give out, an award for a member of staff in an assembly, but actually, how do we embed it? How do we make it part of our everyday practices? So that was a real kind of key aspect of the strategy. And then the final bit was around improving working conditions. If you've opened up any newspaper in the last 20 years, you'll have probably read teachers' working conditions, workload are problematic, and it's one of the main drivers why people leave the profession. So it made sense, if we're going to try and retain people, we have to meaningfully tackle the workload that particularly teachers have to endure. And many people have tried, and it's been a long battle over the last sort of 10, 15 years for the DFE as well. But fundamentally, we've tried to look at what would shift the dial the most. And we're going to get onto technology, I know, but AI, as we've tried to be on the sort of cutting edge, I think, of deploying AI technologies.
Yeah, no, that's useful. There are definitely questions relating to that because I know it's a passion area for you too. If I may, just a couple of connected questions, which is 500,000 data points through surveys, lots of research around what matters to people. Did you craft, I guess, elements of this employer brand and this strategy to attract and retain and help people grow with you? Is it built around your strength areas, i.e. things that you're already good at and therefore you were doubling down on, or was it really and truly centered around the people? Because that probably tells us how far you had to transform the company in order to meet those areas.
I think we were moving in the right direction with some things. We'd invested quite a bit in learning and development. It's quite bizarre. I came into the education from the private sector, worked in lots of different kind of commercial organisations where L&D has always been a core part of most teams. So actually, if you go into most schools, multi-academy trusts, L&D doesn't exist as a function. So one of the things we did, we created that function to add that kind of professionalism to learning, which sounds crazy in an education organisation, but it's one thing teaching students, it's another thing teaching and developing adults. So that was something that we built on, and we introduced a new learning platform called Thrive, which we used to embed a lot of our virtual learning. We've also been looking at the impact of our programs as well. So we had some threads in place, but this strategy helped us to develop some of those a bit further. So we looked at, for instance, building sort of professional learning journeys, so pathways that apply to particular people at stages of their career that could help give them more of a bespoke strategy. We're also launching in September what we call Flight Plan, which is our career advisory service for adults. So we do career advice for students, as you would expect, but actually, we want to provide that service to our staff as well. So often, we might have a teaching assistant that wants to become a teacher. What's the pathway? What are the qualifications that they need to do? So using our internal resources and a bit of AI, we are going to create that advisory service and help them to develop on the career paths that they want to.
Very cool. And then do you mind just talking to me a bit about like the monitoring system? So you have these core pillars to how you've defined what it means to work for the organization. You have a sense of what mattered to people, but the world changes at quite a rapid pace these days. So how do you go about understanding retention and engagement and these elements that remain important to people?
I think this is the crux of it. Everyone has got people strategies that they're implementing, but how do you actually measure their impact? Traditionally we look at staff surveys, and whether you do them as pulse surveys every month. I know some organizations do them weekly, but you're still having to analyze that data, use that data to get decent insights to work out what you need to do next. I think where we're hopefully going with technology is to get more real-time understanding of how engaged our staff are. I spoke to a company last year that designs and puts in place, have you ever been into a retail shop, those smiley faces, they're happy or not? And we looked at that for staff to measure that engagement as they leave the building every day. And that, still something we might look at in the future, but that kind of in the moment feedback, I think, is really important. If you can hook that into AI to understand what went on that day, was student behavior particularly positive, negative? For me, that's the future of understanding engagement. It's that real time analysis of it, so you can adjust and adapt accordingly.
I agree. I think the pace of the feedback loop needs to evolve, right? Because a lot influences how you think and feel and also act on a daily basis, especially in a tense educational setting, I suspect, with children that could drastically influence your mood rather than your engagement with the organisation. I guess how you're feeling that day could be quite heavily influenced by a lot of events around you.
It's you never quite know what can happen in a school on any typical day.
Like yesterday.
We had an air ambulance landing yesterday for one of our students who managed to fall over in the playground, and that can completely change the dynamic of the day, what leaders are having to deal with, and every day. Even the wind can change how a school behaves. So if you have a particularly windy day, it is a well-known fact, most teachers will agree with this, is that students' behavior changes. So
How
yeah,
fascinating.
it's a funny world we live in, but
Yeah,
not quite
indeed.
sure the biological link to that. But
No,
yeah, it
true.
does.
Very true. One last topic before we just dig into technology a little bit more in a second
Mm,
would just be around. So, you have this promise to your people, it's monitored and measured through the engagement survey on an ongoing basis. But
yeah,
measurement for me is only ever half the equation. The improvement and how you drive change, it becomes vitally important. The series that we're doing is around culture change and how you
mm.
shift some of the behaviors in order to improve things like the engagement results. Have you got an example for me, maybe the most memorable one for you, of a change? You've got the insight, you've learned something new that could be from a survey or some feedback, and you've decided to make a change around it.
Yeah, and it's a slightly odd one, but it came. We did a staff survey just before Christmas, and we found that staff started to answer the questions in a different way than we expected. They used it as an output to give us feedback on things that we weren't asking about. And when your staff do that, it generally means that that's really important to them. So, and because we were getting it from lots of different areas, we said, actually, this is kind of really critical feedback. And actually, what teachers were telling us wasn't that workload wasn't the most important thing that was necessarily impacting on their day. It was other more operational issues, really kind of simple stuff like how they log a support ticket with IT. That was causing them more pressure and more stress than actually the workload of being a teacher. And we didn't ask that question, but that's the response that we got. And as a result, we made a number of changes to our support services to try and respond to that. So it's partly it was a human change, but partly it was technological as well. So some of the barriers,
Mm,
and like most organizations, we switched on two-factor authentication
yeah.
and challenges for our staff in being able to engage with us. So we had to address that and make it easier and that in itself, it's surprising because you would expect that workload would be the biggest issue for staff. And it probably feeds into the fact we've done a lot of work improving workload, that it
Yeah.
wasn't on their kind of top 10 list of issues. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny what happens when you're dealing with lots of different elements of engagement. When you reduce the big ones, what then comes up to the surface? And sometimes it's quite trivial things that can be the biggest distractors for staff as well.
Yeah, for me, it's that interesting intersection between the experience that people have with you and that blend of like employee experience almost being an input to
Mm,
engagement being the output of like, if there is friction in their day-to-day world,
yeah.
that is causing, it's not additional workload, it's just a simple job that's been made hard somehow. It just,
Mm,
the experience just rubs and just gets in the way of actually the good outcomes that you ordinarily feel.
yep.
If you think about that in a checkout experience, for example, like
Absolutely.
self-service checkouts are one of the things that get me all of the time. Love the idea, often don't want to speak to anybody when I'm going through the checkout process, but when it doesn't work, it absolutely kills me. And support tickets are kind of the same thing, right? And if they
Yeah.
reoccur, it just gets in the way of the experience.
Yeah, that's it. And when you're kind of driving people to perform in terms of resolving tickets, it creates the wrong kind of cultures where
Yeah.
people then try and resolve or close tickets ahead of it actually being dealt with because, they're worried about their performance. So you create this kind of perfect storm of technology working against you.
Yeah.
And technology really, I quoted the Microsoft CEO the other day in a session because we were introducing a new kind of project management platform, Satya Nadella, who said,
Yeah.
tools don't create culture, but they can shape it. And the
Yeah.
right platforms can enable clarity. And it's so true. Technology doesn't create engagement, but it can help you create the culture that can drive it in the right direction. We found launching Mo really positive, but that hasn't necessarily driven staff engagement in itself. It's
Yeah.
the change in behavior and the recognition that is now instant and system wide across the organization that is the real shift. So it's, you know, technology has a part to play, but it can't create that culture for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. You created me a wonderful segue to what I wanted to talk to you about
Excellent.
next, which is technology as an enabler, because
Mm,
it is rarely ever the tool.
Yep.
that solves all of the problems, but it does go a very long way to either making it easier or giving you access to things that make you 10 times smarter, or you can output 10 times the better quality, or whatever it might be. Generally, when you view technology through that lens, it can be super duper helpful. So I wondered, we've talked a little bit about retention being critical to you as an organization, the role of how you shape that culture to foster highly engaged people. Just wanted to get a sense of your views on how technology as an enabler is starting to shape that more and more.
Yeah.
If there's any advancements or things that you think are worth calling out?
I think it is, as we embed technology in our day-to-day working practices, it has that ability to help shape culture and drive engagement. When we introduced Mo into our organization, we call it lap moments.
Okay.
We were going to call it something completely different, but we got so obsessed with the concept of moments. And actually, culturally, that is a really important concept, isn't it? It's that
Absolutely
kind of in the moment. So lap moments our staff recognition platform. So it is not the reason people go above and beyond in their job, but it shapes how that effort is now seen and how it's acknowledged and how it's valued by leaders and peers across our organization. It gives us such a simple way to recognize colleagues in that kind of real-time way. And we sort of had bits of it before, but we didn't bring it all together in one place. And now it's much more visible, much more consistent and fair as well, so people can see that. And it's helpful that we've integrated the sort of financial element of the reward as well, which is always like the cherry on the top. The peer-to-peer element is probably the most important for us still, but that just gave us that kind of ease of. So it's a good example of how technology is enabling that sort of cultural change. In the same way that if we'd put the wrong platform in, it could have actually done the opposite,
inhibited it.
Inhibited that kind of culture from going. It's the beauty of having a platform for it rather than just standing up in assembly and, it's sort of direct and immediate, and it cuts through some of the noise and delay that you would get with a traditional recognition scheme. And of course, across 33 geographically dispersed academies, celebrating a teaching assistant who's working in a primary in Maidstone in a secondary in Greenwich is fantastic. That they are much more, aware of they are being recognised by a much bigger audience than ever before. And that transforms part of our culture. And every organisation that has multi-sites will have the same challenge. How do you create that consistency of culture across all those different organisational units? We often talk about our schools as being siblings of each other rather than clones, because they've all got their own unique personality and aspirations and values. But actually creating a culture where recognition is treated equally across all schools is really important to us. So staff feel that they're getting treated equally. We're also very heavily unionised. So when we start to treat staff in one school better than another, the unions will always pick us up on it.
Indeed.
It's really important that technology helps to be the enabler of that kind of cultural shift.
Yeah, I often talk to moments as the things that shape the employee experience, and then they showcase your culture, because they're small little micro stories, if you like, that boost visibility of what culture means. Culture through past generations and generations and generations have been told through stories. And I think that's kind of what you're getting, with moments being shared and celebrated, is a flavour for what it looks and feels like to be a part of that particular school, which is great. I think to pick up on your... Sorry, go on, were you going to say something more?
We've also embedded it in we've got an annual awards ceremony, and we've used Mo to drive all of the nominations as well. So you've got this kind of online nomination process, but then you've got what is our kind of end of year in-person ceremony, which is about as big as an event as there is in our school calendar.
Cool.
A big celebration of staff, and it's sort of grown years. But again, it's part of that culture, isn't it? We want staff to feel special. So we put on, it's a night that last year we used the Oscars menu to help design our menu for this level that we're operating.
Yeah, very, very cool. I love that. And I think it talks to the perfect blend that you need to get through human connection, real life, and how technology can help you make it even better. You said one thing as we were talking about visibility being one thing, we've just touched upon that, but the consistency being very, very key. And often what we find as a technology company is that you will always have people championing the job to be done in your organization. You will have had, before you introduce us or before you introduce your project management tool, or whatever it might be, people championing the cause. The challenge is that they are normally the 2.5% of the far right-hand side of the normal distribution curve. And it's the scaling of that that is the difference between individual leadership and behaviors and culture in the organization, I find. And it's often how you make consistently doing that job very easy to capture the 58 odd percent that sit under that middle chunk, the meaty bit of the normal distribution curve. And I think that tends to be the role of technology in organizations, is how you shift the masses, because that's where you really make your high performance leaps, is when you can drive change there, not in the 2.5%, because the numbers are always so small. So it would be interesting if you don't mind, to go to the role of other technologies that probably everybody is talking about at the minute, and the likes of AI, and getting a flavour from you on where you think we are in that adoption cycle, whether you're starting to see signs already of the masses adopting, and what that might look like within your organisation today.
Yeah, I mean, AI is fascinating. I mean, we've been on the journey for a few years now, and I remember I went to an event about 2 years ago with a number of big high street names. I won't name them on the podcast, but they're the kind of people that you would recognize. And we were talking about how we were using AI in developing learning and development. I said, well, we've been doing it for a few months. We're using it to develop content. We're using it to create individual kind of tailored content. And the L&D director from a large organization said, oh, we don't use it because we're not allowed. And I just felt, for once, education has been leading the way in this. There's been some announcements this week, I don't know if you're watching the news, around AI investment within education, because I think the government has also seen the huge potential that it can have on dramatically improving educational outcomes for young people, but also in terms of making schools more efficient in how they work. We've used a number of AI technologies over the last few years, and we're kind of now at the stage we're working with partners to develop new ones as well. So we've got some exciting things happening in our student space, where students, based on so students will do mock exams. The system that we're developing will look at how they've performed in every one of those individual questions, and then we'll tailor a online curriculum for them to then use to kind of fill the gaps in their knowledge. And they'll be able to do that as part of their homework, as part of kind of revision sessions, and just really kind of get them significantly further on with their studies, potentially to 2 grade points above where they would have been, which is what the initial research is looking like it could deliver, which is massive. To go from not getting the grade system has changed since most people probably listen to this podcast went to school. But it's now basically 1 to 9, and 4 is equivalent of a C. So shifting somebody from a 4 to a 6 is quite significant and takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. But the AI we're using is potentially going to get students to that kind of level. And from a workload point of view, going back to how we keep people engaged, and for staff, being able to set homework. So with the platform, we've set it up and developed it so a teacher can set homework for the entire year in a couple of hours.
Wow.
And not just set the homework, but also mark all the homework. So actually it takes homework out of the equation for teachers. They can design it all at the start of the year, and it will constantly mark the homework and keep kind of creating heat maps of where the gaps in the knowledge are, which is kind of AI and some of the technologies. So that's just one of the platforms that we're kind of investing in, and hopefully we'll see some good progress. It benefits both students and staff kind of in equal proportions, which is great.
That's great. And it makes me think back actually to your people promise around the career pathways and the opportunity to build your own personalized learning journey. Are you applying any of that yet on the inside of the organization for your people too?
Yeah, we're just able to develop more content at sort of speed, really. I mean, we had a lot of feedback around kind of leadership skills, line management skills, actually not huge areas of focus for schools. So we were able to develop an entire podcast series of about, I think it's about 30 episodes. And we recorded it, we designed it, developed it, recorded it in 4 days.
Wow.
And a bit of editing afterwards, but fundamentally we were able to get that. And that whole program is bespoke to being a people manager within a school. So it's not content that we've picked off the internet. It is specific culturally to us. It talks about our values. It talks about how we operate. And it very much is reflective of roles within schools. So, without AI, it would have been a lot more challenging. We fed lots and lots of documents into lots of different AI platforms and churned out some pretty decent scripts at the end.
That's very cool. And if I can also then maybe go to your next pillar around, forgive me, it was related to relational dynamics within teams. What's the pillar called?
Building relational trust. So
building relational, okay.
And that there's elements of psychological safety in that, which is really key. And we've done a lot of training with the senior leaders around psychological safety over the last few years, but also around recognition and communication as well, and that transparency and openness. It's quite difficult being a teacher because you're often in a classroom with children all day. So you feel that all the other adults in the school are talking about things that you're not included in. So trying to keep staff connected is like a constant challenge. So we've got some technological solutions to that. So we also rolled out Viva Engage this year, which a lot of businesses will use as part of the Microsoft suite. And that's just been really helpful in connecting not just colleagues across within the academy, but also across academies as well. So now if you're a science teacher in our school in, let's say, Medway, and you've got some resources you want to share, you can share those, and other science teachers across the trust can benefit from that. So how we connect across schools has been a challenge that we've been trying to solve for a while and trying to find the right kind of technology platform to do that.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
It's definitely helped with that.
And now just thinking about the big retailer that you mentioned and the "we're not allowed" comment that you made, not to draw on their individual situation, but thinking others that might be listening to this may well be in the same position. So I just wanted to get a sense from you of like any of the key mindset changes or kind of cultural shifts in which you need to drive to get the most out of it, because you're doing some really cool things.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There are some mind shift changes. I think you've got to embrace an element of risk to some extent, but you've also got to be keen to innovate and take chances on new technologies, even if they're perhaps not perfect. There's a lot of talk about AI hallucination and the challenges that brings. And there was some classic ones in the early days where you could ask the question and it would always give you the wrong answer, no matter how you asked it. It hallucinates less, but you've always got to be aware of that. And you know, you could say, oh, well, we're not going to use it because it's not perfect. Or you could say, let's train people in how to spot hallucinations, how to try and eliminate them. And that's going to be a skill set for the future. So when we're talking to our children and our students about AI, we're encouraging them to embrace it in a positive way, but also to understand its limitations, as well as obviously utilizing it in a kind of ethical way. Obviously, academic integrity of coursework is probably the biggest challenge for educational institutes, and that's enough of a reason to run away from AI and bury your head in the sand. But you've got to be realistic. You can't stop students from using it one way or another. So how do you teach them the right way to use it? How to reference where they've used AI in coursework or writing an assignment. And there's been guidance published which has helped us do that. But you've got to openly embrace it. And I know big organizations have the same challenges that we've had around things like GDPR, cybersecurity. You know, they're all things that you have to accept. We have the added challenge that certain AI platforms aren't available for children. So ChatGPT, for instance, you have to be 18 to use it. So we don't deploy it within school. In fact, we actively block it within school. Whereas Gemini Teens is designed for, I think it's children 13 and up. So we're using it in those appropriate year groups. And in primary, we're using things like Adobe, Firefly, and things like Canva, which are, around kind of image generation, using AI to do photoshopping and that kind of thing. So they are getting access to those technologies, but only at age appropriate times.
Yeah, it comes back to, for me, that technology is the enabler rather than the answer, right? And anything that's helping you get to the answer with individual judgment should be seen that way rather than the answer, right? Which means at least for the next couple of months, we're all right because there needs some individual judgment. It brings me on to the next question, actually, which is, given the rapid pace of technological change that we're experiencing at the moment, I'd love some predictions from you over 2 different time intervals. And I'd ask that you keep it tightly focused on the evolution of workplace culture and employee engagement.
Yep.
So the first one is, in 12 months' time, what are your predictions of some of the biggest evolutions or changes when it comes to culture and engagement?
I think in the next year, we'll start to see AI being used to improve the kind of quality and speed of feedback, particularly in things like performance management.
Yeah.
If you think back, we used to accept that performance management was a twice a year activity. We then moved to continuous performance management and said, actually, we need to do this more regularly. But actually, performance management is an everyday activity. So, technology, I think, will start to become much more about the speed of feedback. And I think we'll see the more of sort of digital tools to kind of support everyday people management activities like recognition, communication, things like recruitment, particularly. There's a lot going on with that, but onboarding as well. When you introduce technologies, fairly straightforward into the onboarding process to personalize it. We've been experimenting with writing individual welcome letters. So in the past, we had a very standard welcome letter to the trust, talked about our history, our values. But what we've been experimenting with is actually talking about the individual and how they will fit into our organization and what opportunities it will have for them. I wouldn't have wanted to write 700 of those previously, but with AI, it could happen. And those are things that can happen in the next 12 months, I think, that those, if they're not already within some organizations now.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And then the next one, maybe a little harder given the pace, but in 5 years' time, what are you thinking are the key kind of evolutions that we've then seen?
I think with the interconnectedness of data, and we've seen platforms this week introducing connectors into your inbox, into your file systems, such as ChatGPT can now reference all of your emails if you want it to. If you give it that kind of power and that kind of data, it can probably pick up from the tone of the communications that I'm sending, how I feel. And probably start to adapt my work. It could probably help me a bit more. It could probably, suggest some well-being tools if I'm having a bad day. I think it will be this embedding of artificial intelligence and, potentially artificial superintelligence, which I think people are struggling to conceptualize what that could actually look like in the future. In 5 years' time, it will be here. It will know pretty much what we're thinking, and be able to help us, not just with our tasks, but with the tasks that we haven't even thought about. And at the moment, when you interact with artificial generative intelligence, you're basically asking it to do a task that you want it to do. But actually where it will get to is that it will work out the task that you forgot about or you didn't think about to make sure that you deliver to your best possible outcomes. So I think it will come from being a kind of a co-pilot, which is sort of what it is now, to actually being a critical friend and actually help people, develop. Or it will replace us all and we'll all be farming and picking fruit. Also entirely possible.
Indeed. I think at the heart of what you're saying is a leap towards high degrees of personalization, I think is the opportunity that organizations have really struggled to do because there has been an inability to process the sheer volume of variables. Whereas I think the opportunity in the employee experience is transformational, which is if you can get to a truly personalized experience as a consequence of these capabilities, it really starts to change the game
Yeah.
on how people think about whether they're engaged or not and what their experience is like or not.
110%. Personalization at scale is possibly the biggest area for engagement to benefit from AI. And if you think about it, it could be across all sorts of different ways. Generic CPD, sheep dipping people through the same course will effectively disappear. So the
Yep.
learning that we'll do will be much more bespoke. But even things like an employee survey, why are you asking me all the same questions that you're asking everybody else? Why don't you ask me the
Yeah.
questions that make the most difference to my role? Or ask me, in the last survey, I said that I was unhappy with this. Why don't you ask me what's changed? Has it improved?
Yeah.
The technology could do that. I don't know if there is a platform out there that could do it. If there isn't, that's a business opportunity.
I was thinking exactly the same thing because I know most of the survey companies very well. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I wonder if that's got to be on their roadmaps. You would hope.
And that correlation as well between how engaged are you versus what is your performance, measuring that strength of that correlation so you can see what are the drivers of engagement. Because actually, and reality is
For
that they're
me
different
as
for
well,
everyone.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Because,
completely.
I mean, we, like many organizations, have been trying to understand what the drivers of engagement are. The booklet somewhere on it. But again, you can only really do that across the whole organization. You could say, for us, one of the things that we found over the years is that when a manager cares about your well-being, that's a massive positive correlation in terms of your engagement. But maybe that's not everybody. And getting those individual drivers of engagement would be huge. Could you imagine, for the people that you manage, that this person wants to be treated in this way, this person is really focused on their developments, and actually having kind of much more personalization of engagement strategies. That for me is probably the exciting bit of the future.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I have one last question for you, and then I'm going to jump into a lightning round, which is
Excellent.
a lot of what we've talked about earlier on is in this relational trust, and key to that being psychological safety.
Yep.
And a lot of these innovations, particularly around AI, often are perceived as quite mechanical and therefore quite transactional. Human beings are quite emotional, whether we believe it or not, or whether we say it or acknowledge it or not. We're largely driven by our emotions.
Yep.
So I'm keen to just get a sense from you of how do we sustain or even increase this sense of human connection, psychological safety, as we immerse ourselves in these new technologies? Is there a magic answer or some kind of key things that you hold yourself true to?
It's a fantastic question. I think the reality is, there have been other challenges to this as well. Hybrid working has had a huge impact on that kind of personal relationship with colleagues. And we're sort of seeing a bit of a shift back to that. It's not one that the education sector is particularly bothered with because we've been here all the time.
Doesn't impact.
So a few head office staff might work from home one day a week, but pretty much if you ask a teacher about it, they'll say, well, I've been in school and haven't worked from home since COVID.
Yeah.
But I think the only way, technology can also create some challenges to psychological safety because it can create a kind of perception that there's more surveillance. The more interconnected your work is to technology, the more opportunity there is for the unscrupulous boss to actually work out how effective you are at your job. You've got to balance that off with more transparency. Why are we using these AI technologies? How do we use them? What's the benefit for you? What's the benefit for the organization? Psychological safety, ultimately, at its heart, relies on that kind of trust and openness. And you've got to almost do more of that to offset the potential challenges with technology. We're all a little bit paranoid when we use AI that it's all going to someday be published on the front of the... Yeah. And so, how do you get psychological safety from AI? That's probably the other question is, it's one thing getting it from human to human, but how does AI reassure us that it is on our side? And if you ask it the question, it will probably be thinking in the background.
Yeah, that is antitrust behavior in its own right. Cool. Let's go on to this lightning round then. This one's fun for me. One tech tool that you can't live without. You don't have to say Mo by any means.
I love Mo. It's an integral part of our organization. But for me, I probably would have said something different yesterday. But yesterday, ChatGPT went down for a few hours. And I had a number of things that I needed it for. And I almost got into a cold sweat about it. So I hate saying this, but I think ChatGPT, I'm just being honest. I think
this is good.
I had to use Gemini a period of time. So it's, no dissing to Gemini, but it's not
It wasn't quite the
ChatGPT.
same. Yeah.
ChatGPT, I've had a relationship with for over near 3 years. So it knows me inside out, and it knows when I ask something what I actually mean. So it is
Exactly that.
it's like
The lock-in is there.
the best PA you could have.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
my actual PA, who would
Yeah,
not want
who
me to
is
say that.
more wonderful.
Cheers.
Next one is a book or a thinker that has shaped your views on organizational culture.
When I started in this role, making the transition from people director to deputy CEO and moving from managing people to managing operations, I read a book from a guy called Dan Heath called Reset. I don't know if you've seen it, but I mean, it was such a powerful book. It talks about how you can create solutions from both technology and humans where you can effectively, for small amounts of effort, leave huge changes in your organization. I've bought copies for loads of people because there's some great examples in there. There's a brilliant one. If you like cats, there's a human solution to how they dealt with the overpopulation of cats, which historically wasn't very nice. They euthanized them, whereas actually what they decided to do, I think this is in San Francisco, they decided to actually neuter them, treat them, and release them. And as a result, the problem decreased because there was less cats breeding, but there were healthy cats. And actually, it's because one person, new employee that started, said, why are we doing this? Why are we killing all these cats? Is there not a better way? And it was just one person asking the right question at the right time.
I'm pretty sure he also wrote The Power of Moments.
He did.
Also a very good book.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great writer. It's quite a natural read. There's lots of business textbooks that are quite a little bit too academic or a little bit too...
Hard-going.
Yeah. It was an audiobook as well, so I've enjoyed it in the car as well.
Good stuff.
Inspirational stories in there.
Biggest myth about AI in education?
Oh, and I get this all the time, and particularly unions, whenever you talk about AI, they get a bit worried about this, that AI will eventually replace the teacher. It won't. It will absolutely replace some of the pointless administrative work that they have to do, but it will never replace the skill, the expertise, the relationship that a teacher has with a student. That's that human element that AI can never kind of replicate.
Yeah, so, completely agree. The culture trend that you're most excited about?
I think we've mentioned it already, but psychological safety as a sort of leadership currency, particularly in times of political changes and the rise of the right wing and Trump, I think psychological safety is more important than ever. And that's what really drives successful organizations. I mean, Google spent millions coming up with the same answer. In the teams that I've built, I've always ensured at the core there is really strong psychological safety, and those teams are the best. So it's really powerful.
Good stuff. And then the very last question. So this one is a very weird one, but we're trying it out, which is you've got no idea who the next speaker is going to be. If you could ask them one question to get their views on when it comes to culture change, what would it be?
Probably not what they would do, but what they would not do. So what do they think organizations should stop doing on a day-to-day basis if they're serious about staff engagement? I would love to scrap email. I think email is one of the biggest kind of elements of distraction and drain on people's psychological states. But unfortunately, when you remove email, you tend to replace it with things like Slack, which doesn't make anything better.
Do the same thing. Yeah, it's somebody else's to-do list, but in a different form.
I would probably, if you go back in time, and I'm just about old enough to remember when email came in and you used to send interdepartmental memos, or you went to talk to somebody, or you picked up a phone and called them. And whilst the pace of progress was slower, it was much more human and it was much more psychologically beneficial, I think. But I've answered the question as well as asked it now.
No, that's great. Richard, it's been absolutely brilliant. For anyone that wants to stay connected to you, where's the best platform or way to connect?
A myriad of ways. LinkedIn, I'm on there, so by all means feel free to connect. If you're not trying to sell me something, I will absolutely accept you. I'm meeting the CEO of Amazon UK next week, and that's just an example of where we bring people from organizations in to work with us, and we're talking about how we develop future STEM leaders for a global market. So if you're the CEO of a big organization and you want to come and meet the future of your workforce, by all means, come and visit and see the good work that we're doing. And likewise, if you, I'm also the chair of our KMT, our teacher training organization. So it's probably right that I give them a plug and say that if you're considering a career in teaching, reach out and I'll put you in touch with the biggest and arguably, because I'm biased, best teacher provider in the Southeast, which is KMT.
Perfect. Richard, thank you ever so much for your time. So much appreciated. And we'll see you all soon.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Culture in Action. If you found today's conversation valuable, we'd love if you follow us, rate us, or review the show. It really helps others find us. And if you're feeling inspired, share this episode with someone who's passionate about building a better workplace. We'll be back soon with more stories from people leaders putting culture into action. See you again next time.